The blood-red sun hung low over the western horizon as Zara Newell clutched her tattered copy of Pride and Prejudice to her chest, her fingers trembling from both the cold and fear. Her father would return soon, and if he caught her reading again, the consequences would be far worse than the welts still healing on her back. She had 15 minutes at most to lose herself in Austen's world before reality came crashing back, 15 precious minutes to remember that somewhere. Somehow, life could be different. Abilene, Kansas, 1871. The once booming cattle town had settled into a more subdued rhythm after the railroad extended further west. But it remained a place where fortunes were made and lost, where men carried pistols on their hips and women were expected to keep house and bear children, not to entertain foolish notions about literature and education. "Girl, where are you hiding?" The voice of Theodore Newell, her father, shattered the peaceful evening. Zara quickly slid the book beneath the loose floorboard under her bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Coming, father," she called, smoothing her simple cotton dress and hurrying down the narrow staircase of their modest home on the edge of town. Theodore Newell stood in the doorway, his imposing frame silhouetted against the fading light. A failed rancher turned saloon worker, he carried the bitter scent of whiskey and frustration wherever he went. "Supper ready?" he demanded, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "Yes, father, bean stew and cornbread," Zara replied, keeping her eyes downcast as she moved toward the kitchen. At 22, Zara had spent the 7 years since her mother's death serving as her father's housekeeper. Her dreams of attending a proper school had died alongside her mother, replaced by endless chores and her father's growing resentment of her unnatural desire for knowledge. Dinner passed in tense silence until Theodore pushed back his empty bowl and fixed his daughter with a hard stare. "Mabel Jenkins saw you at Widow Parker's place yesterday," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "Says you were carrying books." Zara's mouth went dry. Widow Parker, the former schoolteacher, had been secretly lending her books for years. "I was just returning something Mrs. Parker lent to Mother before she died," Zara lied, hating the tremor in her voice. "You're lying to me, girl." Theodore stood slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I've been too lenient with you, letting you keep your head in the clouds when you should be finding a husband." "Father, please," his hand struck her cheek before she could finish, the force of it knocking her sideways. "No daughter of mine is going to waste her life on foolish stories," he roared, grabbing her arm and dragging her toward her room. "Where are they? Where are you hiding them?" Despite her struggles, he was stronger. Within minutes, he had discovered her small collection of treasured books hidden beneath the floorboard, 5 precious volumes she had managed to acquire or borrow over the years. "So this is why you've been turning down every suitable man in town," Theodore snarled, gathering the books in his arms. "This ends tonight." Zara watched in horror as her father threw her books into the kitchen stove one by one, the pages curling and blackening in the flames. When she lunged forward to save her copy of Pride and Prejudice, the last gift from her mother, Theodore caught her by the hair and threw her to the floor. "You need to learn your place," he growled, removing his belt, "and I'm going to make sure you remember it this time." The beating that followed left Zara unable to rise from her bed the next morning. Her back and arms bore the welts of her father's fury, but the physical pain paled compared to the ache in her heart, as she thought of her lost books, her only escape from the harsh realities of her life. As she lay there, tears silently tracking down her face, Zara made a decision. This would be the last time her father hurt her for wanting more than the life he deemed appropriate. One way or another, she would find a path to freedom. The following morning, Theodore Newell left for his shift at the saloon with a final warning. "I expect this house spotless when I return, and no more nonsense about books. Mason Blackwood stopped by the saloon last night asking after you again. He's got a good job at the bank and doesn't mind a wife with notions above her station. I told him to come by for supper next week." The door slammed behind him, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts and her pain. Mason Blackwood was 35, a widower with wandering hands who had been pursuing her since she turned 18. The thought of becoming his wife made her stomach turn. Moving carefully to avoid aggravating her injuries, Zara began her chores. She needed to visit the general store for supplies. and while the thought of facing the townspeople with her bruised face filled her with dread, necessity drove her forward. The bell above the door jingled as Zara entered Abilene General Store, her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. She had pulled her bonnet low, but nothing could fully hide the purpling bruise on her cheek. "Morning, Miss Newell," came the cheerful voice of Mrs. Henderson, the storekeeper's wife. Her tone shifted when Zara raised her eyes. "Oh, my dear, just the usual supplies, please," Zara interrupted quietly, unwilling to endure pity or, worse, judgment. Everyone in town knew Theodore Newell's temper, yet no one interfered in what they considered private family matters. As Mrs. Henderson gathered the items on Zara's list, the bell jingled again, announcing another customer. Heavy boots crossed the wooden floor, stopping a respectful distance from where Zara stood. "Morning, ladies," came a deep voice Zara didn't recognize. "Zachary Archer back from Dodge City already." Mrs. Henderson's face lit up. "How was the cattle drive?" "Profitable enough," the man replied, his tone easy and measured. "Though I'll be glad to spend some time in one place for a while." Curiosity made Zara glance up, and she found herself looking into the clearest blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man, Zachary Archer, stood tall in well-worn trail clothes, his dark hair slightly too long and curling at the collar. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his strong jaw, and though he wore a gun belt like most men in these parts, he carried himself with a quiet confidence rather than the swagger common to cowboys fresh off the trail. His eyes met hers, and something in his expression shifted. He didn't stare at her bruise or offer unwanted sympathy. Instead, he tipped his hat slightly and offered a simple, "Madam." Zara nodded in acknowledgement before returning her attention to Mrs. Henderson, who had finished gathering her supplies. "That'll be $1.42, dear," the older woman said. As Zara reached for her coin purse, a book on the shelf behind Mrs. Henderson caught her eye, a copy of Wuthering Heights that must have arrived with the new shipment of goods. Her fingers hesitated over her coins, a longing so intense washing over her that she nearly swayed on her feet. "Add the book to the lady's purchase," Zachary Archer said suddenly, placing coins on the counter. "And I'll take tobacco, coffee, and whatever mail might have come for me." Before Zara could protest, Mrs. Henderson had wrapped the book in brown paper and added it to her package. "Mr. Archer, I cannot accept, consider it a welcome gift," he interrupted gently. "I just bought the old Miller place outside town and plan to stay a while. Being neighborly is important in these parts. Thank you, but I cannot take it home." Zara's voice dropped to a whisper. "My father would," she stopped, unwilling to complete the sentence. Understanding darkened Zachary's eyes. "The offer stands, perhaps Mrs. Henderson could hold it for you until you find a safe place for it." Mrs. Henderson, who had been watching their exchange with interest, nodded quickly. "Of course, dear, I can keep it behind the counter for whenever you're ready." Zara hesitated, torn between caution and desire. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you, both of you." As she gathered her purchases, Zachary Archer spoke again. "Miss Newell, I understand you might not want anyone walking you home, but I'm headed in that direction anyway. Would you allow me to carry your packages? They look heavy for someone." He trailed off, not mentioning her obvious injuries. Something about his respectful manner and the kindness in his eyes made Zara nod her agreement. As they left the store together, she realized this was the first time in years she had walked alongside a man who wasn't her father or an unwanted suitor. They walked in companionable silence for several minutes before Zachary spoke. "I don't mean to pry, Miss Newell, but I noticed your interest in that book. Do you enjoy reading?" The simple question, asked without judgment or mockery, brought a genuine smile to Zara's face for the first time in days. "More than anything," she admitted, "though opportunities are limited." Zachary nodded thoughtfully. "I have a fair collection of books myself, trail reading, mostly. A man can only listen to the sound of cattle for so many hours before he craves better company." "You read on cattle drives?" Zara couldn't hide her surprise. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "The other cowboys think it's strange, but yes. Books travel well and they're good company on lonely nights." They had reached the point where the main road split, one fork leading to town and the other toward her father's property. "I can manage from here," Zara said, reaching for her packages. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Archer." Zach, he corrected, carefully transferring the packages to her arms, and it was no trouble, Miss Newell. Zara, she offered in return, surprising herself with the informality. Zara, he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. I hope our paths cross again soon. As she watched him continue down the road toward what must be his newly purchased property, Zara felt a strange lightness in her chest, a feeling so unfamiliar that it took her several moments to recognize it as hope. For the next 2 weeks, Zara found herself looking forward to her trips into town. Twice more she encountered Zachary Archer, once at the general store again, and once outside the post office. Each time, their conversations centered around books, with Zachary casually mentioning titles he had enjoyed, and Zara carefully sharing her thoughts on the few she had managed to read. During their third encounter, he mentioned having trouble organizing his library after the move. I've got crates of books and nowhere proper to put them, he explained. The Miller place has a small room that would make a fine study, but it needs shelves. Are you building them yourself? Zara asked, intrigued by the idea of having so many books that shelves were necessary. Planning to, he confirmed. Though I could use some advice on arrangement. Someone with an appreciation for literature might have better ideas than a trail-worn cowboy. The invitation in his words was clear, but Zara knew accepting would be impossible. Her father's watchfulness had increased since the night he burned her books, and Mason Blackwood was set to join them for supper in 3 days. I wish I could help, she said softly, regret coloring her words. Understanding crossed Zachary's face. Of course, just a thought. He tipped his hat and prepared to leave, then paused. That book at Henderson's, it's still waiting whenever you're ready. The reminder of his kindness stayed with Zara as she returned home to continue her chores. Her mind filled with images of a room lined with books, a sanctuary she could only dream about. That evening, as she prepared supper, Theodore Newell made an unexpected announcement. I'm heading to Topeka tomorrow on business. Bank's sending me to deliver some documents. I'll be gone 3 days. Zara kept her expression neutral despite the surge of joy his words brought. I'll make sure everything is in order for your return. See that you do. And remember, Mason's coming for supper when I get back. Her father fixed her with a warning glare. Don't get any ideas while I'm gone. Yes, father. That night, Zara barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities. 3 days of freedom stretched before her like an unexpected gift. As soon as her father's wagon disappeared down the road the next morning, she changed into her best dress and set out for town, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Her first stop was the general store, where Mrs. Henderson greeted her warmly and retrieved the wrapped copy of Wuthering Heights from beneath the counter. Been keeping it safe for you, dear, the older woman said with a conspiratorial smile. And if you're looking for Mr. Archer, he was in earlier buying lumber. Mentioned something about building shelves today. Zara felt her cheeks warm. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I might pay him a visit. My father is away on business. Good for you, child, Mrs. Henderson said softly. That young man has asked about you every time he's come in. Not in a forward way, mind you. Just concerned. With the precious book tucked safely in her basket, Zara headed toward the Miller property, now the Archer ranch, her heart beating a rapid rhythm against her ribs. The walk took nearly an hour, but the spring day was pleasant, with wildflowers dotting the prairie grass and birds calling overhead. The Miller place came into view as she crested a small rise, a modest but well-built farmhouse with a barn and corral beside it. Fresh paint on the shutters and new fence posts indicated Zachary had already begun improvements. As she approached, the sound of hammering drew her around to the back of the house, where she found him working in the shade of a large oak tree. He had set up a workbench and was measuring boards for what appeared to be shelving. Wood chips and sawdust surrounded his boots, and he had rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. He was so focused on his work that he didn't notice her approach until she was just a few yards away. When he looked up and saw her standing there, surprise and pleasure transformed his features. Zara, he said, setting down his tools, this is an unexpected delight, Mrs. Henderson mentioned you were building shelves today, she explained, suddenly feeling shy. I thought perhaps you might still want some advice on organizing your books. A slow smile spread across his face. I would appreciate that very much. He gestured toward the house. Would you like to see the room? I've got the books stacked everywhere, it's quite a mess. I would like that, Zara replied, returning his smile. The small study Zachary led her to was indeed filled with crates and stacks of books, more volumes than Zara had ever seen outside of Widow Parker's collection. She moved through the room in wonder, running her fingers gently over leather bindings and cloth covers. There must be over 100 books here, she marveled. 127 at last count, Zachary confirmed. Collected over many years and many trails, some were my father's. He was a teacher before he caught gold fever and brought the family west. Zara knelt beside a crate containing works of poetry. Was he successful? Finding gold, I mean. Not in the way he hoped, Zachary replied, his voice softening with memory, but he found something better, a peaceful life eventually. He and my mother settled in Colorado for a time. That's where these books came from. And your parents now, both passed on, 5 years ago this winter. I'm sorry, Zara said, recognizing the familiar shadow of grief in his eyes. My mother died 7 years ago, fever. A moment of understanding passed between them before Zachary gestured to the stacks. So what do you think? How would you arrange them if they were yours? For the next hour they sorted books together, discussing authors and themes, occasionally reading favorite passages aloud. Zachary worked on completing the shelves while Zara created an organizational system, separating fiction from non-fiction, poetry from prose. You have an impressive collection of Shakespeare, she noted, carefully stacking the plays. A trail boss I worked for was a former actor, Zachary explained as he measured a board. He could recite entire plays from memory, got me interested. Which is your favorite? Much Ado About Nothing, he replied without hesitation. Beatrice and Benedict remind me that love needn't be all tragedy and swooning, Zara laughed. A romantic cowboy, that must confound your fellow cattlemen, you have no idea. His eyes crinkled with amusement. What about you, favorite Shakespeare? The Tempest, she admitted. Though I've only read it once. Widow Parker had a copy she let me borrow before. Before your father found out? Zachary asked gently when she trailed off. Zara nodded, her mood sobering. He believes reading is a waste of time for women, that it fills our heads with dangerous ideas. Like forming our own opinions and thinking for ourselves. There was no mockery in his tone, only understanding. Exactly that. She sighed, running her fingers along the spine of a volume of Tennyson's poetry. The night he found my books, he burned them all and then. She stopped, unwilling to complete the sentence. Zachary set down his tools and moved to sit beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. No man has the right to harm another person for seeking knowledge, he said quietly. Especially not a father who should protect his daughter. The simple statement, spoken without judgment or pity, broke something open inside Zara. Tears she had held back for years spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered, wiping them away with embarrassment. I shouldn't. You have nothing to apologize for, Zachary interrupted gently. He offered her a clean handkerchief. And you're welcome to read any book in this room anytime you wish. Zara looked up at him, stunned by the offer. What? I mean it, he said, his blue eyes serious. Consider this room your library too. I'll be finishing these shelves over the next few days. By the time your father returns, it will be ready. You can come whenever it's safe. Why would you do that for me? She asked, genuinely bewildered by such generosity. Zachary considered her question for a moment before answering. Because books were my salvation during the darkest times of my life, and everyone deserves that refuge. He paused, then added more softly, and because from the moment I saw you in the store, I knew you were someone special, Zara Newell. The sincerity in his voice made her heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken to her this way, as if she mattered, as if her thoughts and dreams were valuable. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll come back tomorrow, he suggested with a smile. Help me finish organizing and maybe stay for lunch. My cooking's not fancy, but it's edible. I'd like that very much, Zara replied, returning his smile despite her tear-stained cheeks. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Zara reluctantly gathered her things to leave. The afternoon had passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, with Zachary proving to be a thoughtful listener and engaging storyteller. His tales of cattle drives and frontier towns were vivid enough to transport her, and his questions about her own life showed genuine interest in her thoughts and experiences. "I should walk you home," he offered as they stepped onto the porch. "No need," she assured him. "I've walked these roads alone many times. At least let me accompany you part way," he insisted. "The sun will be setting soon." They walked together through the golden afternoon light, their conversation flowing easily from books to childhood memories to dreams for the future. When they reached the halfway point between their properties, Zara stopped. "This is far enough," she said. "I wouldn't want anyone to see and mention it to my father when he returns." Zachary nodded in understanding. "Tomorrow then, around 10. "I'll be here," she promised, clutching her copy of Wuthering Heights to her chest. As she continued alone toward her father's house, Zara felt as though she were walking between two worlds, the bleak reality she had always known and a new possibility taking shape just beyond the horizon. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. True to her word, Zara returned to Zachary's ranch the next morning. She found him already at work in the study, the skeleton of shelving beginning to take form along one wall. "Your timing is perfect," he greeted her with a warm smile. "I could use a second opinion on these shelf heights." The day passed in companionable productivity, with Zachary building and Zara organizing. By noon, the first set of shelves stood finished, and they had filled them with carefully arranged volumes. "It's beautiful," Zara said, stepping back to admire their work. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the colorful spines of books now accessible rather than hidden in crates. "It's getting there," Zachary agreed, wiping sawdust from his hands. "Ready for some lunch. I promised you my mediocre cooking." In the kitchen, he proved himself modest about his skills, preparing a simple but delicious meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. As they ate, Zachary asked about her life before her mother's death. "It was different then," Zara explained, warming her hands around her coffee cup. "Mother taught me to read when I was 4. She had been a teacher back east before marrying father. He tolerated it while she was alive, her feminine fancies, he called them. And after she passed, everything changed. Father had always been stern, but grief made him bitter. He blamed books and education for making mother discontented with ranch life." She sighed. "In truth, I think he simply couldn't bear reminders of her passions. So he forbade your reading," Zachary concluded. Zara nodded. "At first I continued in secret. Widow Parker helped when she could, but as I grew older, his restrictions grew stricter. He became determined to see me married to a sensible man who would cure me of my intellectual interests. Like this Mason he wants you to consider." Something in his tone made Zara look up. Was that jealousy she detected? "Mason Blackwood is 35, works at the bank, and has buried 2 wives already," she said flatly. "He's coming to supper when father returns, and father expects me to accept his proposal. And will you?" Zachary's question was soft but direct. "I would rather." She stopped herself from completing the thought. "I have few options, Zachary. A woman alone has limited choices in this world, especially one without means or family connections." "There are always choices," he replied, his blue eyes serious. "Sometimes we just need help seeing them." After lunch, they returned to their work, though the conversation had shifted something between them. As Zachary measured and cut boards for the next set of shelves, Zara found herself watching his hands, strong, capable hands that created rather than destroyed. "Tell me about your cattle drives," she prompted, wanting to know more about the man who was quickly becoming important to her. "How did you end up buying land in Abilene?" Zachary paused in his work, considering her question. "I started as a drover when I was 17, just a boy looking for adventure after my parents moved us west. Worked my way up to trail boss by 25. For years, I was content with the life, the open sky, different towns, the satisfaction of completing a difficult journey. What changed?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving a streak of sawdust that Zara found unexpectedly endearing. "Last winter, I got caught in a blizzard in the Nebraska territory, was trapped in a line shack for nearly 2 weeks, alone with my horse and a crate of books I was transporting for a friend." "That sounds terrifying," Zara said, trying to imagine such isolation. "It was, at first, but those days of solitude made me realize I'd been running from something, from putting down roots, from the possibility of losing people I cared about like I lost my parents." His expression grew thoughtful. "When I made it back to civilization, I decided it was time to build something lasting. I'd saved most of my earnings over the years, and I'd passed through Abilene often enough to know I liked the area. So you bought the Miller place. And here I am, building bookshelves instead of mending fences on the open range. He smiled at her. Can't say I regret the change. By late afternoon, they had completed a second set of shelves and filled them with more carefully organized books. As Zara placed the last volume, a collection of Walt Whitman's poetry, she felt Zachary's presence behind her. What do you think? He asked, his voice closer than she expected. Turning, she found him standing just inches away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes and smell the clean scent of sawdust and soap that clung to him. It's wonderful, she answered honestly, her voice barely above a whisper, like a dream come to life. For a moment, neither of them moved. Zara could feel her heart beating wildly in her chest as Zachary's gaze dropped briefly to her lips before meeting her eyes again. Zara, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I know we've only just met, but the sound of approaching hoofbeats outside broke the moment. Zachary stepped back, his expression shifting to concern as he moved to the window. Are you expecting anyone? Zara asked, suddenly fearful that her father had returned early. No, Zachary frowned. Stay here. He left the study and Zara heard the front door open and male voices in conversation. Minutes later, Zachary returned, his expression troubled. That was Jim Parker, the sheriff's deputy, he explained. Apparently, there's been trouble on the road from Topeka. A stage coach was robbed yesterday. My father, Zara began, fear clutching at her throat, was not on the stage, Zachary quickly assured her. But the deputy says the roads aren't safe. There's a gang operating in the area. He's warning everyone to be cautious, especially those living outside town. Relief washed over her, followed by shame at being relieved. Despite everything, Theodore Newell was still her father. I should go, she said, gathering her shawl. It's getting late. Let me take you home, Zachary insisted. After what the deputy said, no, Zara interrupted firmly. If anyone saw you accompanying me, word would eventually reach my father. The roads between here and home have always been safe. Zachary looked torn. At least let me saddle my horse for you. You can return it tomorrow. This compromise seemed reasonable, and soon Zara found herself astride Zachary's gentle mare, with him walking alongside to the same halfway point as before. Will you come tomorrow? He asked as she prepared to continue alone. We could finish the last set of shelves. I'll try, she promised, reluctant to part from him but knowing it was necessary. As she rode the remaining distance home, Zara's mind was filled not with fear of highway robbers, but with the memory of Zachary standing close to her among his books, his eyes conveying emotions she dared not name but desperately wanted to explore. The third day of her father's absence dawned bright and clear, but Zara woke with an inexplicable sense of unease. She completed her morning chores with distracted efficiency, eager to return to Zachary and his library, yet something held her back, a nagging worry she couldn't identify. Finally, just before 10, she saddled her father's old mare instead of walking, planning to lead Zachary's horse back with her. The journey went quickly, and soon she was riding up to the Archer ranch where Zachary waited on the porch. His face lit up when he saw her, but his expression quickly shifted to concern when he noticed her troubled look. What's wrong? He asked as he helped her down from the saddle. I'm not sure, she admitted. Just a feeling as if something's about to change. Zachary studied her face for a moment. We don't have to work on the shelves today. We could just talk or read or whatever would bring you comfort. His consideration touched her deeply. Actually, I think I'd like to continue our project. It helps to keep my hands busy when my mind is troubled. Inside, the study looked even better in the morning light, with the 2 completed sets of shelves giving the room a sense of purpose and order. They worked together to build the final section, their conversation flowing naturally between serious topics and lighthearted observations. By early afternoon, the last shelf was in place, and they stood back to admire their completed work. The room had been transformed, 3 wall-length bookshelves filled with carefully organized volumes, a comfortable reading chair positioned near the window, and a small desk where one might write or study. It's perfect, Zara breathed, turning to face Zachary. A true library. It is now, he agreed, his eyes never leaving her face, because you helped create it. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Zachary took a half-step closer, and this time there were no approaching hoofbeats to interrupt them. "Zara," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." "Yes," her heart hammered against her ribs. "These past 3 days have been the best I've had in years. Being with you, talking with you, seeing the way your face lights up when you discover a book you love," he paused, as if gathering courage. "I know it's too soon to speak of such things. We've only just met. But I feel as though I've known you much longer, and I can't let you return to your father's house without telling you that the sound of a wagon approaching at speed cut through his words. Zachary moved to the window, his expression hardening as he looked out. "It's your father," he said grimly, "and he looks furious." Cold fear washed over Zara. "How did he know I was here? Someone must have seen you riding this way." Zachary turned to her, his face determined. "You don't have to go with him, Zara. You can stay here. I'll protect you." The offer, so sincere, so tempting, made her eyes fill with tears, but she knew her father, knew his temper and his connections in town. "He would bring the sheriff," she explained, her voice trembling. "Claim you abducted me or worse. It would be your word against his, and he's lived here longer." "Then I'll face that," Zachary insisted. "Zara, you're 22 years old. You have the right to choose your own path." Before she could respond, Theodore Newell's angry voice bellowed from outside. "Archer, send my daughter out now, or I'm coming in to get her." Zara moved toward the door. "I have to go. If I don't, he'll only grow more violent." Zachary caught her arm gently. "Listen to me. Come back tomorrow if you can. If not tomorrow, then the next day or the next, whenever you can safely get away. This library is yours too now, and—" He hesitated, then continued in a rush, "and my heart along with it if you want it." The declaration, simple, honest, and utterly unexpected, stole Zara's breath. Before she could respond, her father's voice came again, closer this time. "I know you're in there, girl. Don't make this worse for yourself." "I have to go," she whispered, squeezing Zachary's hand once before pulling away. "But I'll come back. I promise." She hurried through the house and onto the porch where her father waited, his face mottled with rage. "Get in the wagon," he ordered, his voice dangerously calm. "Now," Zara complied, knowing that resistance would only fuel his anger. As she climbed onto the seat, Zachary appeared in the doorway, his posture tense but controlled. "Mr. Newell," he called, his voice steady. "Your daughter has done nothing wrong. We've been organizing my library, nothing more." Theodore's laugh was harsh and ugly. "Library, is that what they're calling it these days?" He turned to Zara, grabbing her arm roughly. "Did he touch you, girl? Tell me now." "No, father," Zara answered truthfully, though her cheeks flamed at the implication. "Mr. Archer has been a perfect gentleman. He's been teaching me about different authors," and the slap came so suddenly that Zara didn't have time to brace herself. Her head snapped back from the force of it, and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut into her lip. Before she could register what was happening, Zachary had crossed the yard and seized Theodore by the collar, pulling him away from the wagon. "Don't you ever lay hands on her again," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Theodore struggled against Zachary's grip. "She's my daughter. I'll discipline her as I see fit." "She's a grown woman deserving of respect and kindness," Zachary countered, releasing Theodore with a small shove that sent him stumbling backward. "And if I ever see a mark on her again, you'll answer to me." For a moment, it seemed Theodore might attack Zachary, his hands curled into fists and his face contorted with rage. But something in Zachary's steady gaze must have given him pause. Instead, he spat on the ground between them. "Keep away from my daughter, Archer. This isn't over." He climbed back into the wagon and snatched the reins, turning to Zara with a look of disgust. "As for you, you've brought shame on this family for the last time. We'll discuss your behavior when we get home." The journey back was made in terrible silence, with Zara's mind racing through possible outcomes, each worse than the last. When they arrived, Theodore ordered her into the house with a curt gesture. Inside, he paced the small parlor like a caged animal while Zara stood with her hands clasped before her, bracing for the storm. "3 days," he finally said. "I leave for 3 days, and you shame me in front of the entire town by carrying on with that cowboy." "We weren't carrying on, father," Zara protested. "We were silence," he roared, slamming his fist against the wall. I've had enough of your excuses and your defiance. You will marry Mason Blackwood. I've already spoken to him and he's willing to overlook your indiscretion. Given a substantial dowry. Dowry, Zara repeated, confused. Her father had little money to spare. Theodore's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. I've decided to sell this place. Mason's offered a fair price, considering he's taking you as part of the bargain. Horror washed over Zara as she understood. You're selling me along with the property. Don't be dramatic, her father snapped. I'm securing your future. The papers are already drawn up. We'll sign them tomorrow and the wedding will take place next week. No. The word escaped before Zara could stop it, a simple, quiet refusal that nevertheless echoed in the small room like a gunshot. Theodore went very still. What did you say? Zara straightened her shoulders, drawing strength from the memory of Zachary's words. She had the right to choose her own path. I said no, father. I won't marry Mason Blackwood. I'm 22 years old and by law you cannot force me to marry anyone against my will. For a moment, Theodore looked genuinely shocked. Then his expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. You ungrateful little fool, he hissed. You think that Cowboy wants you for anything but what any man wants from a woman. Once he's had his fill, he'll leave you with nothing but a ruined reputation and maybe a bastard child. Zachary isn't like that, Zara insisted, though her father's words stirred fears she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. All men are like that, Theodore countered. Your precious mother taught you nothing about the real world with her books and her fancy ideas. Don't speak of her that way, Zara said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Mother wanted more for me than to be sold to the highest bidder. Theodore moved so quickly that Zara had no time to defend herself. His hand closed around her throat, backing her against the wall with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. You'll do as I say, he growled, his face inches from hers. Or I'll make sure your cowboy friend regrets the day he ever set eyes on you. Fear for Zachary overrode her fear for herself. What do you mean? Theodore released her throat, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Accidents happen all the time out here, especially to men who don't know when to mind their own business. You wouldn't, Zara gasped, rubbing her throat. Try me. Theodore's eyes were cold. Now get upstairs. You'll stay in your room until the wedding, except for chores. And if I catch you trying to leave or send any messages to Archer, he'll pay the price. Understood, Zara nodded numbly, her mind racing for solutions but finding none. As she climbed the stairs to her room, despair threatened to overwhelm her. She had tasted freedom and possibility for 3 beautiful days, only to have it snatched away from her window. She could just make out the roof of Zachary's house in the distance. Somewhere in that house was a library he had built for her and a man who had offered his heart along with it. Tears slid down her cheeks as night fell, bringing darkness but no answers. Dawn broke gray and drizzly, matching Zara's mood as she rose and dressed for what promised to be an unbearable day. Her father had locked her in her room overnight, but she heard him unlock the door shortly after sunrise. Get breakfast ready, he called through the door. Mason will be here at noon to sign the papers. Downstairs, Zara went through the motions of preparing a meal, her mind frantically searching for escape. She considered running, but her father had taken precautions. The horses were locked in the barn, and he kept the key with him. Even if she managed to flee on foot, he would easily overtake her on horseback. As she placed a plate of eggs before her father, an idea began to form. It was desperate and dangerous, but it might be her only chance. I've been thinking, father, she said carefully, keeping her eyes downcast. You're right about Mr. Archer. I was foolish to believe his attentions were honorable. Theodore looked up suspiciously. What game are you playing, girl? No game, she insisted. I've realized my mistake. Mason Blackwood is a respected businessman with a secure future. That's more important than childish notions about books and romance. For a long moment, Theodore studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Finally, he grunted in grudging approval. About time you showed some sense, he muttered. Make sure you look presentable when Mason arrives. And none of your educated talk men don't want a wife who thinks she knows more than they do. Yes, father, Zara cleared his empty plate. May I go to the stream to wash before Mason arrives? The water in the kitchen barrel is nearly gone. Theodore considered, then nodded. Be back within the hour. And don't think about running off. There's nowhere you could go that I wouldn't find you. I understand. With a bucket in hand, Zara left the house and headed toward the small stream that ran along the edge of their property. Once out of sight of the house, she abandoned the path and cut through a stand of trees that would hide her from view. Her heart pounding, she began to run toward Zachary's ranch. The distance seemed interminable, the soft ground made muddy by the morning's drizzle pulling at her boots and slowing her progress. By the time the Archer ranch came into view, Zara was breathless and spattered with mud, her hair escaping its pins and her dress damp with rain and perspiration. As she approached the house, Zachary emerged onto the porch, alerted by the sound of her approach. His expression shifted from surprise to concern as he took in her disheveled appearance. "Zara," he hurried down the steps to meet her. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "No time," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "Father plans to force me to marry Mason Blackwood today. The papers are already drawn up. He's selling the ranch to Mason as my dowry." Zachary's face darkened with anger. "He can't do that." "You're of age. He's threatened to harm you if I refuse," Zara interrupted, her voice breaking. "And I believe he would do it. He's desperate and angry, and he sees me as property to be disposed of." Reaching out, Zachary gently brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "What do you want to do, Zara? Whatever you decide, I'll support you." The simple question, what did she want, nearly undid her. No one had asked her that in years. "I want to be free," she answered, her voice steadier now. "Free to read, to learn, to choose my own path, free to—" She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Free to explore what might exist between us." Zachary's eyes softened. "I want that too," he admitted quietly. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." "Then help me," she pleaded. "Father expects me back within the hour. When I don't return, he'll come looking. He'll bring Mason, maybe others." For a moment, Zachary was silent, his expression thoughtful. Then he nodded decisively. "We need to leave Abilene," he said. "At least until we can sort this out legally. I have friends in Dodge City who can help us. The sheriff there owes me a favor. He can keep your father at bay while we consult a lawyer." "Leave?" The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. "But your ranch, your books, the ranch will wait," Zachary assured her. "And the books?" He smiled suddenly. "Well, the most important ones can come with us." Moving with purpose, he led her inside to the kitchen, where he quickly gathered supplies while explaining his plan. "We'll take the wagon. It's faster than riding double, and we can bring more with us. I know trails the stagecoach doesn't use. We can be in Dodge City by tomorrow evening if we push hard." Zara watched him work, reality setting in. "I'm asking you to upend your life," she said softly. "To risk everything for someone you've only known for days." Zachary paused, setting down the provisions he was packing. He crossed to her and took her hands in his. "Zara, I've crossed half this country multiple times. I've faced stampedes and blizzards and hostile territory, but I've never met anyone who made me want to stop wandering until I met you." His eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering. "I believe some people recognize each other's souls right away. It doesn't take months or years, just the right moment, the right conversation, the right look across a room." Tears filled Zara's eyes at his words. "I feel it too," she whispered, "as if I've known you much longer than 3 days." "Then trust that feeling," he urged. "Trust me, we'll figure out the rest together." It was the together that convinced her. Zara nodded, squeezing his hands. "What can I do to help?" "Go to the study and choose which books you want to bring," he suggested. "We can't take them all, but a crate or two should fit in the wagon." While Zachary continued preparing for their journey, Zara hurried to the library they had created together. She moved along the shelves, selecting volumes with care: Shakespeare, Austen, Whitman, a collection of poetry, and several novels she hadn't yet read but longed to explore. As she carefully packed them into a small crate, she heard the thunder of approaching hooves. Zachary appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Your father," he confirmed, "and he's not alone." Fear clutched at Zara's heart. "Mason and 2 other men I don't recognize." Zachary handed her a small revolver. "Take this and go to the root cellar. There's a trapdoor in the kitchen pantry. Stay there until I come for you." "No," Zara said firmly, though she accepted the weapon. "I won't hide while you face them alone. This is my fight too." Admiration flashed in Zachary's eyes, but he shook his head. "Zara, these men are armed and angry. Your father has been drinking, I can tell by the way he's riding. Please, go to the cellar. For me." The plea in his voice convinced her. With a reluctant nod, she followed him to the kitchen, where he showed her the trapdoor hidden beneath a rug in the pantry. "I'll come for you when it's safe," he promised, helping her down the ladder. "If you hear gunshots and I don't come—" He hesitated. "There's a tunnel that leads to the creek bed. You can follow it about 50 yards east to where it comes out near the Willow Grove. My friend Jim Parker, the deputy, find him. He's a good man." "Be careful," Zara whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "Please." Zachary caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I will." Then he closed the trapdoor, and Zara heard the sound of the rug being replaced. The root cellar was cool and dimly lit by small grates near the ceiling that allowed in slivers of daylight. Zara found a position where she could hear what happened above, the revolver clutched in her shaking hands. She heard the front door open and her father's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage. "Archer, where is she? Where's my daughter?" Zachary's reply was calm but firm. "She's not here, Mr. Newell, and even if she were, she's a grown woman with the right to make her own choices." "She's my daughter," Theodore bellowed. "Her choice is to do as she's told." Another voice joined in the smooth, oily tones of Mason Blackwood. "Now, Mr. Archer, surely we can resolve this like civilized men. The girl is clearly confused, possibly even unwell in her mind. Her father and I only want what's best for her." "Unwell?" Zachary's voice hardened. "The only illness Zara suffers from is being under the control of men who don't recognize her intelligence and spirit." "See here," came a third voice Zara didn't recognize. "We've got papers drawn up legal and proper. The girl's dowry includes this property, so technically, you're trespassing on land that belongs to Mr. Blackwood." "Those papers aren't worth the ink they're written with unless Zara signs them willingly," Zachary countered, "and she won't." The sound of furniture being overturned reached Zara's ears, followed by her father's enraged shout. "Search the house. She has to be here." Heavy footsteps moved overhead as the men began tearing through the rooms. Zara pressed herself against the earthen wall of the cellar, the revolver steady in her hands now as she prepared to defend herself if discovered. Above, the confrontation continued. "You've got no right to search my home," Zachary protested. "Get out before I have to make you leave." "Is that a threat?" Mason's voice had lost its veneer of civility. "A promise," Zachary replied evenly. "Sheriff Hollister won't look kindly on breaking and entering, especially when one of the intruders is his own deputy." A moment of silence followed this revelation. "Deputy." Theodore's voice was uncertain now. "What's he talking about, Jenkins?" "He's bluffing." The unfamiliar voice, apparently Jenkins, replied, though he sounded less confident. "Am I?" Zachary challenged. "Jim Parker rode out yesterday to warn me about the stagecoach robberies. He mentioned that Sheriff Hollister suspected someone in town might be involved, someone with inside knowledge of who was carrying valuables. Someone who works at, say, a bank." Mason's laugh was forced. "That's absurd. I'm a respected businessman, with 2 dead wives and a sudden interest in marrying the daughter of a failing rancher," Zachary finished. "Seems convenient that both your previous wives passed shortly after you insured their lives." The accusation hung in the air, followed by a moment of tense silence. Then came the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "You talk too much, Archer," Mason said, his voice suddenly cold. "I think it's time we ended this discussion permanently." "Mason," Theodore sounded alarmed. "We agreed no shooting." "Plans change, old man," Mason replied dismissively. "Your daughter's not here, which means she's probably run off to the authorities with what she overheard yesterday. We need to clean this up and leave town." "What she overheard?" Theodore's confusion was evident. "What are you talking about?" "Your precious daughter was hiding outside my office window when I was discussing business with Jenkins and Miller. Saw her running away just as we finished. Figured she'd come straight to her cowboy hero here." Zara's breath caught. She hadn't overheard anything. She'd been at the stream when her father claimed she was at Mason's office. Mason was lying, but why? "I had nothing to do with any robbery," Theodore protested, his voice rising in panic. "This was supposed to be a simple business arrangement. You get the girl and the land. I get enough money to start fresh elsewhere." "And now it's a cleanup operation," Mason said coldly. "Jenkins, tie the old man up. He's a loose end we don't need. I'll deal with Archer." The sounds of a scuffle broke out overhead, followed by her father's panicked shouts and then a heavy thud that shook dust from the cellar ceiling. "You killed him." Theodore's voice was high with fear. Just knocked him out, Jenkins replied. Easier to tie him that way. On your knees, Archer, Mason ordered. Nice and slow. You won't get away with this, Zachary said calmly, though Zara could hear the tension in his voice. Sheriff Hollister already has his suspicions about the robberies. Which is why we'll be long gone before they find your bodies, Mason replied. It's a shame, really. You were smart enough to figure it out, but not smart enough to keep your mouth shut. Zara couldn't wait any longer. Her father might be cruel, but he didn't deserve to die for Mason's crimes. And Zachary brave, kind Zachary, who had shown her what love could be, she couldn't lose him now. Moving as quietly as possible, she climbed the ladder and pushed gently against the trapdoor. The kitchen was empty, the sounds of confrontation coming from the front room. Easing the door open, she slipped out and crept toward the voices, the revolver gripped tightly in her hands. From her position in the hallway, she could see into the front room. Zachary stood with his back to the fireplace, hands raised. Mason pointed a pistol at him, while Jenkins finished binding Theodore's hands behind his back. Her father knelt on the floor, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, his eyes wide with fear. Taking a deep breath, Zara stepped into the doorway, the revolver aimed steadily at Mason. Put your gun down, she commanded, her voice stronger than she felt. All heads turned toward her in surprise. Mason recovered first, his expression shifting to a calculated smile. Zara, my dear, he said smoothly, I'm afraid you've misunderstood the situation. Your friend Archer here has abducted you and attacked your father. We're simply trying to rescue you. I heard everything, she replied, keeping the gun trained on him. About the stagecoach robberies, about your dead wives. It's over, Mason. Mason's smile vanished. You stupid girl. Do you really think you can shoot me before I kill your precious cowboy? Zara, get back, Zachary warned, his eyes never leaving Mason's face. Instead of retreating, Zara took a step forward. I don't want to shoot anyone, she said evenly, but I will if I have to. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Jenkins made a sudden lunge toward her. Without hesitating, Zara fired, the bullet grazing his arm and sending him stumbling backward with a howl of pain. The distraction was all Zachary needed. In one fluid motion, he kicked the poker stand by the fireplace, sending it crashing into Mason, who fired his gun reflexively. The bullet splintered the wooden floor as Zachary tackled him, both men falling in a tangle of limbs. Zara kept her gun trained on Jenkins, who had recovered enough to reach for his own weapon. Don't, she warned, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Jenkins froze, his eyes darting between her and the struggle on the floor, where Zachary had gained the upper hand and was now pinning Mason down, one hand gripping the banker's gun wrist. Zara, the rope, Zachary called without looking up. She spotted the coil of rope Jenkins had used to bind her father. Keeping her gun aimed at Jenkins, she edged toward it and tossed it to Zachary, who quickly secured Mason's hands. Jenkins next, Zachary instructed, now turning his attention to the wounded deputy. Hands behind your back. With both men securely bound, Zachary turned to Theodore, who had remained kneeling throughout the confrontation, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Are you injured beyond that cut, Mr. Newell? Zachary asked, his tone remarkably civil considering the circumstances. Theodore shook his head mutely. Zachary untied him but kept a wary eye on his movements. I had no idea, Theodore finally said, his voice hollow, about the robberies, the murders. Mason said he just wanted a young wife to help with his banking business, someone who could read and write better than most girls around here. So you sold your daughter to him, Zachary said flatly. Theodore flinched at the blunt assessment. I thought I was securing her future. He looked at Zara, something like remorse in his eyes. I never wanted you hurt. You hurt me every day, Zara said quietly, lowering the revolver now that the immediate danger had passed. Every time you punished me for reading, for learning, for wanting more than you thought I deserved. Her father had no response to that, his gaze dropping to the floor in what might have been shame. We need to get these two to Sheriff Hollister, Zachary said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Mr. Newell, can you ride into town and bring the sheriff back here? I don't want to risk moving them in case they have accomplices waiting. Theodore nodded, seemingly relieved to have a task. I'll go right away. He paused at the door, looking back at Zara. I'm sorry, daughter, for everything. After he left, Zachary moved to Zara's side, gently taking the revolver from her still trembling hands. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. The events of the past hour crashed over her all at once, and Zara felt her knees buckle. Zachary caught her, guiding her to a chair while keeping a watchful eye on their prisoners. "I thought he was going to kill you," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "But he didn't," Zachary assured her, crouching beside her chair, "because you were brave enough to save us all." Mason glared at them from where he sat bound on the floor. "Don't get comfortable," he spat. "The sheriff won't believe a pair of nobodies over the town banker, and your father will back my story when he realizes what's good for him." Zachary smiled grimly. "You might be surprised. Sheriff Hollister has been suspicious of you for months. Your mistake was trying to involve Mr. Newell in your schemes." "Theodore Newell is a drunk and a failure," Mason sneered. "His word means nothing." "But mine does," came a new voice from the doorway. All eyes turned to see an elderly woman standing there, a shotgun held competently in her weathered hands. Widow Parker, Zara's former secret source of books, surveyed the scene with shrewd eyes. "Mrs. Parker," Zara rose from her chair in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Your father stopped by my place on his way to town," the older woman explained, keeping her shotgun trained on the prisoners. "Asked me to come help while he fetched the sheriff, told me everything." She cast a disapproving look at Mason. "I always knew there was something not right about you, Blackwood, too slick by half." With Widow Parker's help, they secured the prisoners more thoroughly and tended to Jenkins' wound. The former deputy remained sullenly silent, but Mason continued to make threats until Zachary gagged him with a neckerchief. It was nearly dusk when they heard horses approaching. Sheriff Hollister arrived with 2 deputies and Theodore Newell. The lawman listened to their accounts with growing gravity, paying particular attention when Widow Parker confirmed that she had seen Mason and Jenkins meeting secretly on multiple occasions before stagecoach shipments. "I keep track of comings and goings," she explained. "Old habit from my teaching days. These 2 always met the night before a valuable shipment came through information only the bank would have in advance." As the sheriff and his men prepared to take the prisoners to town, Theodore approached Zara hesitantly. "Daughter," he began, his voice rough with emotion. What I tried to do was unforgivable. I see that now." Zara regarded her father silently. The years of hurt couldn't be erased with a single apology, yet something had shifted between them. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," she said honestly, "but I'm willing to try in time." Theodore nodded, accepting her terms. "I'll be selling the ranch anyway," he said, "but not to force you into marriage. I think it's time I moved on from this place, too many bitter memories. Maybe go west to California, start fresh." "What about me?" Zara asked, though she already knew her own path would not lead alongside her father's. Theodore glanced at Zachary, who stood respectfully distant but watchful. "I think you've found where you belong," he said simply. "If that's what you want." It was the closest he would come to giving his blessing, and Zara recognized it as the concession it was. "Thank you, Father." After the sheriff and his prisoners departed, with Theodore riding alongside to give his formal statement in town, Zara, Zachary, and Widow Parker sat on the porch as twilight deepened into night. "What will you do now, dear?" Mrs. Parker asked Zara, her kind eyes concerned. Zara looked at Zachary, who had been silent throughout her conversation with her father. "I'm not sure yet. I know what I want, but—" Zachary met her gaze, a question in his eyes. "And what is it you want, Zara Newell?" Taking a deep breath, she answered truthfully. "I want to stay here. With you, with the library we built together. I want to read every book on those shelves and add 100 more. I want—" She faltered, then continued more softly, "I want to see if what I feel for you is as real and lasting as I believe it to be." Widow Parker made a sound that might have been approval before rising from her chair. "I believe I'll make us some coffee," she announced, tactfully retreating into the house. Alone on the porch, Zachary moved to sit beside Zara on the bench. "What you feel," he said carefully, "is it anything like what I feel? Because since the moment I saw you in that store, clutching that book like it was more precious than gold, I've been falling in love with you, Zara Newell." The simple declaration spoken without artifice or calculation brought fresh tears to Zara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "it's exactly like that." Zachary reached out, gently brushing away a tear with his thumb. "Then stay," he said. Not as my guest or my housekeeper, but as my partner. We'll build the library together and a life around it. People will talk, Zara warned, though she leaned into his touch. An unmarried woman living with a man, then marry me, Zachary interrupted, his blue eyes serious. Not tomorrow or next week, whenever you're ready. We have time to know each other better first, if that's what you want. Zara considered his words, this man who offered her choices instead of commands, partnership instead of ownership. I think, she said slowly, that sometimes people do recognize each other's souls right away. Zachary's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. Tentatively, he leaned forward, his intention clear in his eyes. Zara closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home, gentle at first, then deepening with the promise of all that might follow. When they finally parted, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? He asked, his voice husky. Yes, Zara replied, her heart fuller than she had ever thought possible. Yes to all of it. Autumn 1872. Golden light filtered through the tall windows of the library, casting warm patterns across the polished wooden floor and illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Zara Archer, no longer Newell for over 6 months now, carefully shelved the latest addition to their collection, a rare copy of the Scarlet Letter that Zachary had surprised her with upon his return from Kansas City. There, she said with satisfaction, stepping back to admire the full bookshelves that now lined 3 walls of what had once been a simple study. What do you think? Zachary looked up from the desk where he had been writing in the logbook they kept of their growing collection. Perfect, he said with a smile that still made her heart quicken. Though we might need to consider expanding soon. The north wall of the dining room gets good light. Zara laughed, crossing to perch on the edge of his desk. Are you suggesting we turn the entire house into a library? Would that be so terrible? He asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture that had become a familiar part of their private language. Not terrible at all, she admitted, though we might need to keep at least one room for more conventional purposes. A look of understanding crossed Zachary's face. Any particular conventional purpose you have in mind, Mrs. Archer? Zara's free hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, still flat beneath her simple dress. Perhaps a nursery, she suggested, watching his expression carefully. In about 7 months' time. For a moment, Zachary stared at her, comprehension dawning slowly. Then he was on his feet, gathering her into his arms with a whoop of joy that echoed through the sunlit room. A baby, he asked, his voice filled with wonder as he set her gently back on her feet. We're having a baby, Zara nodded, happiness bubbling up inside her at his reaction. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday when you were out fixing the north fence. Are you pleased? Pleased doesn't begin to cover it, Zachary said, his hands cradling her face as if she were made of precious porcelain. I'm overjoyed, overwhelmed, terrified in the best possible way. I felt the same when I realized, Zara admitted. I keep thinking about the kind of parent I want to be, so different from what I knew growing up. Zachary's expression softened. You'll be an amazing mother, Zara. Our child will grow up surrounded by books and ideas and endless possibilities. And love, she added quietly, so much love. That most of all, he agreed, kissing her softly. The past year had transformed Zara's life in ways she could never have imagined that day in the general store when a kind cowboy bought her a forbidden book. After their hasty wedding moved forward, when Widow Parker insisted propriety couldn't wait for a lengthy courtship, they had thrown themselves into building a life together at the Archer Ranch. The library had been just the beginning. With Zachary's encouragement, Zara had started teaching reading lessons to the children of neighboring farms and ranches. What began as informal sessions around their kitchen table had grown into regular classes held 3 days a week in a small building Zachary had converted from a storage shed. Word of the Cowboy's library had spread throughout the county, bringing visitors from as far as Topeka to see the unusual collection. Some came out of curiosity, others with genuine interest, but all were welcomed equally by the Archers. Zara's father had made good on his promise to leave Abilene, selling his property and heading to California with the proceeds. He wrote occasionally stiff, formal letters that nonetheless showed he was trying to mend the broken relationship with his daughter. Zara responded with equal care, building a fragile bridge across years of hurt. Mason Blackwood and his accomplices had been convicted of robbery and murder, their sentences ensuring they would never again threaten anyone in Kansas. The revelation of Mason's crimes had initially scandalized Abilene, but the town had quickly rallied around the young couple who had helped bring the criminals to justice. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, Zara and Zachary sat together on the porch swing he had built for her birthday, watching the changing colors paint the prairie sky. "I've been thinking," Zachary said, his arm around her shoulders. "With the baby coming, maybe we should consider hiring some help around the place. The cattle business is going well enough to afford it." Zara nodded against his shoulder. "That might be wise, especially if I'm to continue teaching." "Do you want to continue?" he asked, careful as always to ensure she knew her choices were her own. "I do," she said firmly. "Perhaps not immediately after the baby comes, but yes, those children, especially the girls, need to know that reading isn't just a luxury, it's a path to freedom." Zachary tightened his arm around her. "Just like it was for you." "No," Zara corrected gently. "Books showed me the possibility of freedom. But you, Zachary Archer, you built me a library and read with me. You gave me the courage to claim that freedom for myself." He turned to face her, blue eyes serious in the fading light. "You had that courage all along. I just reminded you it was there." As twilight settled over the prairie, bringing with it the first cool breeze of evening, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from a frightened young woman hiding books beneath floorboards to a teacher, a wife, and soon-to-be mother who no longer had to hide her love of knowledge or her dreams for the future. Inside their home, shelves of books waited, not hidden or forbidden, but proudly displayed and regularly used. The library Zachary had built for her had become the heart of their home, just as he had become the heart of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Zara smiled, placing her hand over his where it rested protectively over their unborn child. "I'm thinking that sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't just found in books. Sometimes we get to live them." Zachary's answering smile was tender as he leaned down to kiss her in the gathering darkness, the library lights behind them casting their entwined shadows far out into the Kansas night, two figures who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to write their own story, one page at a time. Spring 1880, the apple trees behind the Archer home were in full bloom, their pink and white blossoms scenting the air with the promise of summer. Beneath their spreading branches, wooden benches arranged in a semicircle held nearly 24 children of varying ages, their faces upturned and attentive as Zara read aloud from Treasure Island. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. She intoned dramatically, much to the delight of her young audience. 7-year-old Thomas Archer, perched on the front bench beside his 5-year-old sister Elizabeth, bounced with excitement. "That's a pirate song, isn't it, Mama?" he called out, unable to contain himself despite the rule about interruptions. "Indeed it is," Zara confirmed with a smile for her son, whose blue eyes, so like his father's, sparkled with enthusiasm. "Though I think we'll skip the rum in our version." Laughter rippled through the gathering of children. What had begun as informal reading lessons had evolved into the Abilene Prairie School, a proper educational establishment that drew students from throughout the county. 3 years earlier, the town council had officially recognized Zara's efforts, providing funds to expand the school building and hire an additional teacher. As she continued the tale of Jim Hawkins and Long John Silver, Zara spotted Zachary approaching from the direction of the barn, their youngest child, 2-year-old James, riding on his shoulders. The sight of them, Zachary's dark hair now threaded with silver at the temples, James's chubby hands gripping his father's hat, filled her heart with the same warmth it had since the day they met. "And that's where we'll stop for today," she announced, closing the book to a chorus of disappointed groans. "We'll continue Jim's adventure tomorrow. For now, remember your letters practice, and those of you in Miss Wilson's mathematics group have equations to complete." As the children gathered their slates and books, Thomas and Elizabeth raced toward their father and baby brother. "Papa," Thomas called, "Mama's reading about pirates, real ones with swords and ships and buried treasure." Zachary swung James down from his shoulders, setting the toddler carefully on his feet. "Is that so? Sounds dangerous." The most dangerous, Elizabeth agreed solemnly, her dark braids swinging as she nodded. Unlike her brother, who had inherited Zachary's coloring, Elizabeth was Zara's miniature, from her serious brown eyes to her love of creating stories of her own. "Well then," Zachary said, crouching to their level, "you'll need to be very brave tomorrow to face such perilous tales." "We're always brave," Thomas assured him, puffing out his small chest. "Like Jim Hawkins, and like you and Mama when you caught the bad men." The children had heard the story of their parents' courtship many times, though always in an age-appropriate version that emphasized courage and justice rather than violence. "Speaking of brave deeds," Zachary said, "Mrs. Henderson sent word that the new shipment of books has arrived at the store. Who wants to help me collect them after supper?" Both older children immediately volunteered while James, not to be outdone, chanted, "Me too, me too." As the children chattered excitedly about the prospect of new books, Zachary crossed to where Zara stood watching them with a smile. "Successful lesson?" he asked, bending to kiss her cheek. "Very," she confirmed. "Though I suspect half the boys will be playing pirates at recess for weeks to come. Better pirates than outlaws," Zachary chuckled. "Remember when you read them Robin Hood?" Zara groaned at the memory. The Miller twins spent a month taxing apples from every orchard in the county. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah Wilson, the young teacher Zara had hired to assist with the growing number of students. "Mrs. Archer," she called, hurrying across the yard. "The most wonderful news. I've just had word from the Education Board in Topeka. They've approved our curriculum for the next school year, including the advanced reading program for girls." Zara's face lit up with pleasure. "Sarah, that's marvelous. We've been waiting for that approval for months." The advanced program had been Zara's passion project, a special course of study designed to prepare young women for college entrance examinations. When she had first proposed it, many in town had been skeptical, arguing that such education was wasted on girls who would only become wives and mothers. "Not wasted," Zara had countered firmly at the town meeting. "Enhanced. An educated mother raises educated children. An educated wife is a true partner to her husband." Her most powerful argument, however, had come from her own life. The lending library she and Zachary had established in a purpose-built addition to their home now served the entire county, bringing knowledge and stories to those who might otherwise never have access to books. As Sarah returned to the schoolhouse to prepare for the afternoon lessons, Zachary slipped an arm around Zara's waist. "You've changed this town," he said softly. "When I bought the Miller place, Abilene was just a stop on my journey. Now it's a place where learning is valued, where girls are encouraged to read and think for themselves." Zara leaned against him, watching as their children played beneath the apple blossoms. "We changed it together," she corrected. "You built that first library when it was just a dream. Everything else grew from there." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a writer, Jim Parker, once a deputy and now sheriff of Abilene following Hollister's retirement. "Afternoon, Archers," he called, dismounting with a tip of his hat. "Got something here that might interest you." From his saddlebag, he withdrew a package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "This came on the afternoon stage, all the way from California, according to the postmark." Zara accepted the package, recognizing her father's handwriting on the label. Though their relationship had remained somewhat formal, Theodore Newell had become a more consistent correspondent over the years, especially after the birth of his grandchildren. Twice he had even visited, awkward occasions that had nevertheless helped heal old wounds. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said. "Will you stay for coffee?" Parker declined, citing duties in town, and soon rode off with promises to attend the school's end-of-term recitation the following week. Inside their home, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family and ever-increasing book collection, Zara carefully opened the package from her father. Inside was a handsomely bound book with a note tucked between its pages. "What is it?" Zachary asked, settling beside her on the sofa while the children played in the adjoining room. "It's Pride and Prejudice," Zara said, her voice catching as she ran her fingers over the embossed leather cover. "The first book my mother ever read to me, the one my father burned." She unfolded the note, written in her father's shaky hand. "My dear Zara, I found this copy in a bookshop in San Francisco and thought of you immediately. It cannot replace the one I destroyed, nor can any apology erase the pain I caused you. But perhaps it can be a symbol of my continuing regret and my pride in the woman, wife, mother, and teacher you have become despite my efforts to limit you. Your mother would be so proud of you and the family you have created. I know I am. With affection, your father. Tears blurred Zara's vision as she finished reading. Wordlessly, she passed the note to Zachary, who read it in silence, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Are you all right? He asked gently when she had composed herself. Zara nodded, cradling the book in her hands. I think I am. It's strange. For so long, books were the center of the conflict between my father and me. Now this book feels like closure somehow. Before Zachary could respond, they were interrupted by a chorus of small voices as their children tumbled into the room. Mama, Papa, come see, Thomas urged, tugging at their hands. Elizabeth made a little library for her dolls. Sure enough, Elizabeth had arranged a row of wooden blocks as shelves with scraps of paper carefully folded to resemble tiny books. The dolls need stories too, she explained seriously. Everyone needs stories. Zachary laughed, scooping her up into his arms. You're absolutely right, Princess. Stories make life better. Like how you and Mama have a story, Thomas asked. About how you built her a library and read with her, exactly like that, Zara confirmed, reaching out to smooth her son's unruly hair. That's the most important story in our family. Can you tell it again? Elizabeth pleaded. Please. Zachary exchanged a smile with Zara over the children's heads. What do you think, Mrs. Archer? Shall we tell them our story again? I think, Zara said, setting aside her father's gift to embrace her family. That's the perfect ending to our day. As twilight gathered outside the windows of the home they had built together, Zara and Zachary settled with their children before the fireplace, the very spot where, years earlier, they had faced danger side by side. Now, surrounded by books and the family they had created, they began again the tale of a young woman who loved to read and the cowboy who built her a library. It was a story of courage and transformation, of finding love through shared pages and shared dreams. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful act of love is not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but simply creating a space where another person can fully become themselves. In the glow of the fire, with her husband's arm around her shoulders and their children's rapt faces upturned, Zara knew that the library Zachary had built for her had become so much more than shelves filled with books. It had become the foundation of their life together, a testament to the power of words to heal, to connect, and to transform. And in that moment, surrounded by all she had once thought impossible, Zara Newell Archer knew with absolute certainty that their story, like all the best stories, would continue to be told and retold, inspiring new chapters for generations to come.